And joining me now is Dr. Anthony Fauci. He's, of course, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Dr. Fauci, welcome back to Meet the Press. Let's start with, obviously, the concerns of a lot of folks, the state of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Do you anticipate we will at least know something more definitive come Friday when the advisory committee meets next?
Yeah, I'm fairly certain of that, Chuck. I think by Friday we'll know which way we're going on this. Hopefully we'll get back on track, but I don't think there's going to be anything that'll linger beyond that. I hope not. I don't think so.
In hindsight, given, I'm sure you've seen the surveys, since the announcement of the pause, vaccine hesitancy is up. We've seen vaccine appointments go unfilled. I know you've made the case that, hey, please, look, the fact that we're telling you should give you more confidence, not less. But unfortunately, it appears that it is the reverse. Do you look at how this sort of spiraled out here and wonder if there should have been a different way you guys handled this?
Well, what we do, Chuck, and that's why we keep saying we leave it to the science. We have the experienced FDA and CDC people who are looking at it and monitoring it. There's one case, then 2, 3, 4. And then when they got to 6, they say, we really need to pause. Hopefully it'll be a quite temporary pause to do a couple of things. One, examine that hopefully there are not several more out there, to alert physicians, stay heads up for this. We're concerned it's a very serious complication, although it is extremely rare, as you well put. You have 6 cases in close to 7 million people. The other thing about it, Chuck, that's important is that you want to let the physicians out there know who might see women or anybody with this condition that the standard way you would think about treating clots is with the anticoagulant heparin. That would be contraindicated in this case because heparin could actually make things worse. So there's a twofold reason for doing it. one, to pause and take a look in more detail about it, and 2, to make sure that the physicians treat people appropriately.
Did you work with European regulators on who went through this with the AstraZeneca vaccine? Because obviously it looks like these 2 vaccines, which are made with the similar technology, seem to be having a similar issue with blood clots in a certain segment of the population. I guess the question is, could you have made a designation that was a bit more narrow and say, women, Dr. Peter Hotez was saying it's possible that we'll end up saying women who are taking birth control shouldn't take the J&J vaccine. Why not make a specific group on the pause rather than the entire population?
Yeah. I don't think we have enough information to do that, Chuck, quite honestly, because when you talk to our colleagues in Europe, particularly in the UK, it isn't only women. There are men involved, and it isn't always associated with birth control by any means. So I think we have to be careful. We did not have enough information to make a narrow restriction off the bat. When we get more information, and that's what we're talking about Friday, it may be by the time you get to Friday that they will say, okay, we've looked into it now, here are some of the restrictions. But I think it would have been too early to have restrictions without looking more closely at it.
A lot of people have pointed out that there is higher risk for blood clots if you take certain medications that are on the market today. Do you think we don't know how to explain risk properly to the public?
Well, there's no doubt about it. I think the thing that the public generally doesn't fully appreciate is the issue of what relative risk is. They hear about a risk, and they don't know what it is relative to other things that they do. And that's some of the things you have to put into perspective. We run into that all the time, Chuck, about getting people to fully understand the idea about relative risk. That's going to be an issue as we get into what we can and cannot do as more and more people get vaccinated regarding masks and going out into the community and going to restaurants and things like that. Relative risk is a critical issue that sometimes is difficult to understand.
The third shots, both the CEOs of Moderna and Pfizer have indicated it's likely we're going to need a third shot. There are some people that are going to hear when pharmaceutical CEOs say it, they may raise an eyebrow. I assume this is going to be a federal government decision. What can you tell us about your where we are on the research about the need for a third shot?
Well, absolutely. You're absolutely correct. It is going to be a public health decision. It's not going to be a decision that's going to be made by a pharmaceutical company. We're partners with them because they're supplying it. It'll be an FDA CDC decision. The CDC will use their advisory committee and immunization practices the way they always do. And what we'll do, Chuck, is we'll look at the durability of the response, namely measure the antibodies. We'll get, hopefully soon, a good correlate of immunity. And if the correlate goes down and you see it start to slope down, you could project when it's going to be so low that you might have a danger of having breakthrough infections. When that happens, clearly you're going to see a recommendation for a boost. The other thing is you might start seeing more breakthrough infections that go beyond the level of the efficacy of the vaccine, and then you might also make a decision to do it. But it will be a public health-based decision, not a pharmaceutical company-based decision.
When would you expect the government to be able to have that information, be able to make those recommendations? That's something by the end of the summer, when we're sort of nearing the 1 year mark of the phase 3 trials?
Yeah. You know, it depends on how the slope of that curve goes down. My projection, just from my experience that I have, Chuck, I think by the end of the summer, the beginning of the fall, we'll know. We'll have a pretty good idea whether we'll need to boost.
By the way, going back to the Johnson & Johnson, what's more likely, that we will still use the Johnson & Johnson vaccine with some restrictions, or is it very possible we don't use it at all?
You know, everything is on the table. Again, I'm telling you I don't know so that it doesn't come and bounce back at me, but I can give you my estimate. My estimate is that we will continue to use it in some form. I doubt very seriously if they just cancel it. I don't think that's going to happen. I do think that there will likely be some sort of warning or restriction or risk assessment. I don't think it's just going to go back and say, okay, everything's fine, go right back. I think it'll likely say, okay, we're going to use it, but be careful under these certain circumstances.
The idea of life back to normal after you've been vaccinated, Governor Ron DeSantis, a Republican from Florida, he thinks that the messaging has been muddled. He says, you know, you tell people on one hand you've got to get vaccinated, but you still got to do all these things. You still got to social distance. He's concerned, and he's not alone here, that it almost defeats the incentive to get the vaccination. It shouldn't, but it can. Why does a vaccinated person have to wear a mask?
Okay, this is something that as we get more information, it's going to be pulling back that you won't have to. But currently the reason is that when you get vaccinated, you are clearly diminishing dramatically your risk of getting infected. That's one of the things we've got to make sure everybody understands. You dramatically diminish it. However, what happens is that you might get infected and get absolutely no symptoms, not know you're infected, and then inadvertently go into a situation with vulnerable people. And if you don't have a mask, you might inadvertently infect them. Now, there's a small risk of that, but it's there. The other thing is that there may be variants that are circulating. We know New York area has their own variant, right. A 526. There's a South African variant. Fortunately for us, Chuck, the 117 variant that is dominant in Europe and in UK is right. Also now dominant in the United States. Thank goodness the vaccine works very well against that variant.
The state of Michigan and some other governors are nervous that about certain outbreaks right now. They would like a surge in vaccines. Is that an effective way to beat back a hotspot?
You know, when you're in the middle of a hotspot, the best thing to do is to try and contain it. And that's why the government is sending in people to help out with testing, help out with contact tracing, try to get the distribution of the vaccines that are already there more expeditiously distributed. So they're putting resources in there to help them. But the best way when you're in the middle of a real big outbreak and a big surge is really to shut down things much more so. If you take vaccines from other places and move it around, you make that place vulnerable to what's going on in Michigan. That's the reason why you're not seeing a lot of remobilization of vaccines from one state to another.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, as always, sir, really appreciate having you on and trying to explain this to a nervous public. As always, sir, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Chuck.
Of course. Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.